Well, to take this issue further, I'm joined by Tumi Dlamini. She's from the Master Builders Association. Thank you so much for joining us, Tumi.
Thank you.
Now, the building sector must be a fertile ground for exploitation of workers. How does the MBA respond to government's initiative to try and get minimum wages, minimum standards?
Well, Master Builders South Africa is an association for employers within the industry. And currently within Master Builders Association, in each of our regions, we do have collective bargaining regimes that are applicable in some of the regions. But obviously it's not across all provinces, and that's basically why I think the Department of Labour has, to a certain degree, instituted these investigations to try and establish within the industry whether there is in fact room for ensuring that they do set a minimum wage for all of the employers in all of the country.
Now, they're going to be doing these workshops going around the country. They'll be coming to Johannesburg soon. What sort of submissions will you be making in the public consultation process to them?
Well, we have actually consulted with some of our members within the industry across the regions in each of the provinces, and we have found that there is in fact a commitment to engage with the Department of Labour into its investigations. What we are hoping to achieve as well is to ensure that through these public consultations that will be taking place, we will begin to unravel some of the issues that are a hindrance towards setting minimum wages. And we're also confident that through the public consultation, not only with employers, but with labour and some other important industry stakeholders, we will actually come up with an outcome that speaks to the reality and the complexity that you find exists within the building industry.
You talked about the hindrances. I think one of the things that comes to mind, and it was in the insert, was this business of different sized employers. Obviously, a bigger employer can afford a lot more than a smaller one. Are you going to be trying to campaign for there not to be one blanket over everyone?
Well, you know, there are various complexities that exist within the building industry, and one of the realities is that quite a number of the companies operating within the industry are smaller companies, and you find very few large national companies. So the smaller companies, you will find them within the regions, and they're very localized. And along with that localization is the different economic circumstances that you will find within each region. So we have, to the extent that we've been able to, reached out to each of our members, both small companies and bigger companies. And as I said earlier on, what ultimately we would like to do is to unravel these complexities that exist, and in fact, the fact that an employer that's working in Gauteng may not necessarily be in the same position, or rather an employer in the Eastern Cape may not necessarily be in the same position to provide the same wages as an employer in Gauteng. So these are all the issues that will need to be considered very carefully in the department's investigations into sectoral wage determination. But ultimately, I think the outcome is to ensure that there are fair wages that are paid within the building industry, and to ensure that smaller and medium enterprises as well are, to the extent that the investigation finds out, can actually also match some of the wages by the bigger companies.
And just briefly, Tumi, just give us a sense of the impact the NUMSA strike had on your particular industry.
Well, you know, as the building industry, we very much rely to a large extent on material, most of which have components that consist of steel. So we were affected in the sense of the delays that we experienced in some of the construction programs that we saw on site. So the strike is now over. Workers have gone back to work, but what we are finding is that there's a backlog that we need to get through as the industry. And so it had various knock-on effects. So it wasn't just the provision of material. So with the provision of material not taking place, you found that the program itself was being delayed. And with the delay of the program, the completion as such is also being delayed. So it's going to take a bit of time for the industry to get back on its track with regards to its programs for the various sites.
Can you just quantify in terms of the losses that you made in terms of revenue and so on and so forth in terms of the NUMSA strike?
Well, that's an exercise that we are still conducting at this stage across the country, and I'm sure that very soon we'll be able to come up with figures. But it's vast. It is quite vast, and it didn't only just affect bigger companies. It affected also smaller companies, but also very importantly manufacturers within the industry. And this is a source of some of the material that we need in order to build some of the projects.
Dumit, there's so much more I could ask you, but that's where we'll leave it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That was Dumit Dlamini. She's Executive Director at the Master Builders Association.